Good morning and welcome to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I am your host, Stewart Smith, and I'm happy to have Mitch Davies back in the studio with me today.
Good morning, guys.
Welcome back, Mitch. Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
We've got a great show for you guys today. We are going to be talking about the retirement income gap. So let's get into this, Mitch. I tell you, we see this a lot from folks that come in and do their planning with us. And, what most people are a little surprised to see is just the difference between what they think they need and what they actually need to fund retirement. And we call that the retirement income gap. And I'll just start by saying that, most people are under the impression that about a 4% withdrawal rate from their investment portfolio is going to be the safe withdrawal rate, meaning how much they feel like they can safely take out of that portfolio without eroding principal too much and making that portfolio stretch out and last. And when you look at a 4% withdrawal rate and inflation that's around 3%, you're probably talking about a portfolio that needs to average in excess of a 7% return to just not erode principal. And if we go with that number, then a $1 million portfolio, which sounds like a lot.
It does.
Is actually, if you go with that 4% withdrawal rate on that, that's $40,000 a year, Mitch.
Right.
And even if you've got Social Security in addition to that, it's not living, the big life.
Right.
And so, a lot of people are surprised at that. And I can tell you that if you're not fortunate enough to have a pension or something on top of that, then that can be hard to live off of.
It can, and you're absolutely right, Stuart. I mean, that 4% safe withdrawal rate has been the standard, for the last 10, 15 years. And what we've seen is a couple massive shifts, right? We've seen not only the inflation landscape, dramatically increase over the last 5, 10 years, especially as we've seen, especially post-COVID, we've seen a lot of government spending. We've seen inflation become more of a problem, right? Become more of something we have to dramatically plan for. In addition to that, we've seen, dramatic healthcare improvements, which are creating longer retirements. So when we've got volatile markets, we've got increasing inflation at a rapid rate that's, you used to be able to just say 1.5%, 2% inflation. Can't do that anymore. So we've got longer retirements, we've got more inflation. This is becoming more and more complex and requires more complex planning. And thankfully, it's a dynamic landscape. We have a lot of different ways to address this income gap. So I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the average retirement now lasts 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's 2 or 3 decades of expenses that your savings has to cover without a paycheck coming in.
Right.
And that can be a scary thought for a lot of folks, I know. And so, and then, like you said, healthcare is that wild card.
Yeah.
Fidelity estimates the average couple will spend $315,000 out of pocket on healthcare and retirement. And I promise you, people are not averaging that into their retirement plan.
No.
There is a gap between what people assume they'll need and what they've actually planned for. That gap is often $500,000 to $1 million, and most don't discover that they don't have what they need until it's too late.
And that's that's one of the main questions that we hear when people first come in and sit down with us is what, they want to see that, how do we map that out? How do we cover that gap? How do we cover different market scenarios? How do we cover different environments that are certainly going to happen throughout a 20, 30-year retirement? Is, we're going to see major expenses come up. We're going to see down markets. We're going to see up markets. We're going to see healthcare. How do we take what we've worked for the last 35, 40 years to build and have it cover all these different scenarios? And that's the biggest question that we see that we're able to answer for folks.
Yeah, and I tell you, if you're within that 10 to 5 year window,
Yep.
down to 5 year window, and you're getting into that retirement red zone, we like to call it, where those decisions that you make in that last 5 years before you retire are critical decisions. and can impact the entirety of that 20 to 30 year retirement. You know, sit down with us, let us take a look, let us get our arms around things, let us see what adjustments need to be made now. Let us try to understand, you know, is there a gap that we need to start addressing, and giving us the time that we need to do that. That is critical, that we have the time to go ahead and make adjustments and go ahead and fix that gap, you know, while we still can.
Right. And, you know, that segues perfectly into the first point. You know, what we see a lot is that people think that, you know, the only way to fill that gap or to even bridge that gap in any way is just to continue working. And we see it so often, Stewart. People come in and they're working part-time, you know, maybe it's a couple and both of them are working, you know, they've stepped back, they partially retired, they're working part-time for a few more years to help bridge that gap. But what we find when we sit down and run different tax analysis and really look at the, you know, the overall picture, is they could have bridged the gap without working, and they're actually working to pay more taxes on Medicare and to pay more taxes on Social Security. And so we find a lot of inefficiencies there that if we are able to sit down with them before they get to that point in that retirement red zone, it's really can make a huge difference.
Huge difference. And I tell you, we have people in our office all the time. I was sitting with a potential client yesterday, and she was just sharing with me that the current advisor that she's working with, she really likes the guy. He's really a personable person and really, you know, has tried to do good by her. But she said, you know, Stewart, I sit up in bed at night and I still have questions that aren't being answered. I'm still wondering, like, you know, I'm still working. I'm in my, you know, mid-60s. I like what I do and I have a lot of flexibility and I make great money, but I'm wondering, am I working to just pay more taxes at this point? Yeah. And, you know, does it make sense for me to keep working? And how much is it truly helping me as I'd like to step away here and, you know, do the things that I really want to do and focus more on the retirement that I really want. But at this point, I just can't get those questions answered. And that's exactly the kind of questions that we do answer, because we talk about it all the time, but we are a planning first retirement planning firm, and we get extremely detailed in the planning that we do for folks. And, you know, a lot of guys are very vague on these things. I mean, she said her current advisor had told her, hey, you should probably look at doing Roth conversions, and then it never came up again.
Right.
And it's like, Mitch and I are just baffled by that, because we're like, look, you know, it's your job as a retirement planner to not only, you know, tell the client that they need to consider Roth conversions, but to carry that ball forward and actually model them out, find the optimal Roth conversion strategy that's going to work for that client, and then make sure that you know, if you need to, you take that client's hand every single year and you do make sure that you're doing the Roth conversion, you're getting the money out of the IRA, you're getting it over into a Roth account where it can grow tax-free from there, and they never have to worry about paying taxes on that money again or taking required minimum distributions. And you know, that's what we do. That's you don't just mention it and then it never comes up again. That you leave that client wondering, like, do I need to do these? Like, how do I do these? How does this look? What does this impact? You know, how exactly does this impact me long term? And I think, you know, that's what we're doing every day with our clients at the firm, is real, detailed, actual taking action retirement planning for our clients. And, you know, we've heard it time and time again that clients have been with other advisors and worked with other firms, and they come over to us and they say, I have never seen planning at the level that you guys do it, and you have just so much brought me so much clarity and so much more confidence in what I'm doing in retirement, and you guys have really helped me just take all these worries off the table and sleep better at night, understanding that I can confidently go take that vacation or buy that vacation home we've always wanted. And that's what we do. That's what we do. We give clients confidence. We alleviate that stress and anxiety that they have of potentially running out of money or making a wrong move, because we're there to guide them and to really be their quarterback, so to speak, when it comes to all financial matters in their life. And they're able to, anytime they want, come sit in our office and sit down and say, hey, I'm thinking about this major purchase. I'm thinking about buying a car. I'm thinking about, buying, making a big investment that I want to do. And what does that look like, guys? Can I do this? Am I going to be okay? And we can definitively, give them the answers that they're seeking. If you think that this is something that would benefit you, if you think there's true value in just getting a second opinion from guys that live, eat, breathe, and sleep retirement planning, ClearPath is where you need to come. You need to go to clearpathretirement.com, hit the Get Started button today, Get Started Today button, and let us take a look, guys. Just let's have a conversation and see if we can bring some strategies and some ideas to the table that you've never thought about. And we'd love to have that conversation with you. You can, like I say, clearpathretirement.com, hit the Get Started button, and let's have that conversation. Welcome back in to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I'm your host, Stewart Smith. I am here, as usual, with Mitch Davies, and we are talking about the retirement income gap today, and that's the topic of this show. And what we're talking about is how people come in and we're doing planning with them, and sometimes there's a major difference between what they think they're going to need and what they actually need to make sure that they have the income and can live the lifestyle they're accustomed to in retirement. And one of the things I want to talk about is not just that the gap exists, but how do we start to use strategies to start to fill that gap. And one of those strategies that we have really deployed for our clients over the last 5 or 6 years that I've seen make a huge impact is a Roth conversion strategy.
Yeah.
And that is a strategy where if you've saved pre-tax money, meaning if you've saved in an IRA, a traditional IRA, a 401k, or a 403b, those types of pre-tax accounts for retirement, and all of the money that you have approaching retirement is in those pre-tax accounts, then if you're of the same mind that we are at the firm, that taxes are probably only going up in the future, and that it may make sense at some point here to start thinking about getting some of that money out of those pre-tax accounts and getting it over into a Roth account. Because when you go ahead and bite the bullet and pay the taxes on that money and get it and then go invest it over into a Roth IRA account, which is after-tax money that you invest, that money grows tax-free from there, and you never have to pay taxes on that money again. And, when you look at this strategy, it really makes sense with the world that we live in today. And I tell you, the best time to be thinking about this strategy is kind of in that window. We call it the tax arbitrage window, which comes between the year that you retire and the year that you hit required minimum distribution age. which for most folks listening to this show is probably going to be aged 73. So if you retire at 65 and you have to start taking money out of these accounts anyway due to required minimum distributions, which is, kind of that point where the government says, hey, you've enjoyed tax deferral on this money long enough, you have to start taking a small percentage of this money and paying taxes on it every year because we want to start getting, our cut of this money. Then that is a perfect opportunity while your income is, not as high as it was more than likely when you were working. And you can, because your tax liability is somewhat lower, and you also, if you're 65 or older up until 2028, you're probably enjoying that extra tax deduction that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act introduced, and you're getting an extra, $6,000 standard deduction per person. So for married couples, an extra $12,000 up until certain income thresholds, which for a single person would be $75,000 a year, and for a married couple would be twice that at $150,000 a year. Then, this is the perfect opportunity to start looking at this strategy and getting, some of that money out of those pre-tax accounts, like I say, biting the bullet, going ahead and paying the taxes now, and then getting it over to a Roth account where you can enjoy that money for the rest of your life, tax-free, all the growth, everything. You don't have to take required minimum distributions. And it's just a wonderful feeling once you get that done to know that we're done with taxes on this money. And a lot of people don't do that, Mitch, because of something called the 5-year rule, and they're a little confused on that. Can you help clarify how that works?
Yeah, so it's an amazing strategy, Stewart, and this is the kind of thing that we're doing all the time at the firm, right? This is the kind of planning that we spend the majority of our time doing. The biggest difference people see coming over from an accumulation planner to someone like us who are hyper focused on the retirement planning is we're spending a lot of our time in meetings talking through these different, this tax arbitrage window and different strategies that we can utilize to optimize the tax situation. And it's where, a lot of people are coming from an environment where they're just talking about, all right, here's your returns for the year. Are you working and making money? That's it, right? We're focused on a lot of these different things. And so I think this is a very important strategy that we're building models showing out the optimal Roth conversion strategy for however many years that's going to be. And then we're following up and executing this stuff. We're meeting with clients every week, every day almost, it feels like, and following through on Roth conversion strategies, getting this money. What we can do is withhold the taxes. We can handle all that stuff for you. We'll move it over from the IRA to the Roth account. Pay the taxes for you, because we found that the biggest problem people have is they don't want to go to the tax office at the end of the year and pay a bunch of taxes. We can handle that for you. But this is the kind of stuff that we're executing and we're doing. That's why it's so critical to work with a firm who's focused on this stuff. And Stewart, the 5-year rule on the Roth is very misunderstood. Only the contributions, anything like that, can always be taken out after 5 years. The only time that this comes into play is when you've got growth in the account after 5 years. And especially, pre 59.5. But if you're doing a conversion, if you go ahead and establish a Roth account, convert pre-tax money to the Roth, you could always pull out those contributions if you needed to and not have to pay any penalty. There's a 10% penalty on anything in between when you start in the 5 years on the earnings. But the way we structure retirement income, and this is one of the core fundamentals of retirement income planning, is the Roth is going to be the last account we touch. It's going to enjoy tax-free growth. It's one of the only vehicles we have for tax-free growth in the current tax code. So we don't want to mess with that Roth. We want to either have that be the final thing we tap into, or ideally, if possible, make that pass on to the next generation. That can be our legacy. That can be our discretionary income. So we're not going to plan to touch that anyway. So the 5-year rule very, very rarely affects anybody and is very rarely actually acted on.
That's right. And there's always a lot of confusion around that, because we've had people sit with us and say, well, I don't want to do a Roth conversion because I can't touch that money for 5 years, and that's just not true. You cannot touch the growth in that account for 5 years, but the principal, the money that you converted, you can always get to if you needed to. And, like Mitch said, I think it's very important to understand, we say it to clients all the time, like, would you rather leave your children money or a tax problem?
Yep.
And so, the IRA, if you leave money in an IRA to a non-spousal beneficiary, there is a rule in place now that got passed, I believe it was the Secure Act, that says that if you leave money, IRA money, pre-tax money, to a non-spousal beneficiary, meaning anyone other than your spouse, then that person now has to take that money and put it into an inherited IRA account, a designated account, and they have to have that money out of that account within 10 years of the date of that person's death and pay all the taxes on it.
Right.
So it's not ideal to leave that money to a non-spouse beneficiary anymore. What you would rather leave them is Roth IRA money, because if you leave Roth IRA money and you've been able to convert all that money, then that person never pays a penny in taxes on the money that you left them. There's not even a tax issue or anything to think about. Right. It's just free and clear. And I tell you, I don't know about you guys, but if you're going to leave me money, please leave it tax-free. I would really appreciate that. So, so Roth conversions are just a really powerful tool. We just, got through with a meeting with a couple this morning before coming to do the show, where we were able to show them that it made $1 million difference in what they would be actually leaving and as part of their legacy. And that is incredible that strategy can create that kind of difference, but it actually can. And if you're wondering, if you're sitting around wondering, hey, I keep hearing about this Roth conversion thing, but I'm just not real sure about it. I'm not sure if that strategy would work for me. I really have a lot of questions, but it does interest me, and I want to really understand this. Give us a call, 864-775-5033, or go to ClearPathRetirement.com and let us know you want to have a conversation. We'll sit you down. We'll look at, how much IRA money you have. We'll run some scenarios for you. We'll model it out. We'll look for the optimal Roth conversion strategy that's going to benefit you the most. And then we'll just show it to you. And if that makes sense and it's logical and you really want to pursue this, we can at least give you the confidence of understanding every aspect of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and exactly how it's going to benefit you in the long run. And you can go execute those Roth conversions with confidence. Like I say, ClearPathRetirement.com. Come see us. Let's talk about Roth conversions and whether they make sense for you. Welcome back in to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I'm your host, Stewart Smith, and I've got Mitch Davies here. And guess what, guys? It's time for Mitch's Market Minute. Glad to have him back this week. Let us know what your thoughts are, Mitch.
Excited to be back, Stewart. As always, we can get back to the Market Minute, and we've got a ton of fun stuff to talk about. So, as always, we're going to stick to our same structure of first talking about where the markets are at today, this week, what's going on overall. Second, what's been going on for the year, what developments we're watching, and then third, what we're looking forward to in the future. What do we have our eyes on for the next week, the next month, what sectors? So to start things off, the S&P, we got up to 7,000 about a month ago. We're back down to around 6,700 or so. So a little bit down, about 300 points down from all-time highs, there's a ton going on. We've got the Middle East stuff going on. There's a lot happening right now. Oil's up. We'll talk about that. With the NASDAQ is same deal, about the same percentage down from all-time highs, about 300 points. And what we're watching is, we introduced this a couple weeks ago, and the volatility index, which is we call the VIX, where it's right at about 23. And to reiterate with that, we want, in a healthy market, the volatility index will sit around 11 to 14. The lower the better, right? So 1 on the VIX would mean that there's no volatility expected in the market. That would mean that markets are just expected to move exactly in a consistent manner, which, is always up and to the right, like we like to say. It's always going up and going to the right. And the higher the VIX, the more volatility that's expected. We see this spike when we have, geopolitical events, when we have election cycles, when we have any major developments coming up. And it's been elevated, above this 20 range for a few weeks now since this Middle Eastern conflict started. And so we're watching this spiked up to 23, 24 this morning. We still got some reports coming out of, the Middle East about different strikes and different oil fields and storage facilities and energy facilities getting hit. There's a lot of tension over there, and we're waiting for this to play out. And as this is playing out, we're seeing this spike in the VIX. What we also saw this morning was the PPI data come out. So we have the CPI, which is more commonly known. This is what you would refer to as inflation. This is the number that you hear when people say, oh, inflation's this percent this month or this year. This is the producer side of it. So we've talked about it before. This is the producer price index. So how much are the producers, the manufacturers, the developers seeing inflation in their end before it's passed on to the consumer? And these numbers were higher today as well. So what that means is we have an FOMC meeting today, the Federal Open Market Committee. This is Jerome Powell. This is the people who determine the interest rates. And we were expecting a couple rate cuts this year, but as this inflation stays high and as oil is trading for almost $100 a barrel right now, we're expecting a very reserved outlook from the Fed today. We're expecting them to come out and say, hey, we're going to hold steady, and current administration is really pushing for lower rates. We're seeing the housing market sort of stall out. We're not seeing as many new homes be sold. We're not seeing as many current listings be sold. So we're in a weird spot where the country needs lower rates. We need to lower these rates to, increase loans, increase new home acquisitions, a lot of things. But when inflation and oil and volatility is high, it's hard for them to justify doing that. So it creates a tough spot, and you will again hear this term stagflation get thrown around, where there's not much, where inflation is going up and there's not much economic growth. So a lot of stuff we're watching here. GDP, we're waiting on the report today. We had advanced estimates are showing a lower number. We want to see at least 2 to 3% growth. We're seeing a much lower number than that. And you want to see that growth continue to grow every year, and we're not seeing that. So we're going to watch that. We're watching oil. We're watching this volatility index. And with all of this stuff going on, guys, the main point I wanted to hammer home is if you're in retirement, if you're getting near retirement, and you're trying to keep up with all this stuff, because like we always talk about, in the accumulation years, when you're still working and you're contributing and you're earning money and you're growing your accounts, it's not as important, right? It's not as, obviously it's going to affect the accounts, and your 401k is going to up and down and all that, but when you're getting ready to retire, it becomes much more critical to understand this stuff. And if you're trying to do all this on your own and trying to follow all these different economic timelines and landscapes, it's really challenging. And it's very important to have a firm of professionals who, we live, eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. We're studying this stuff every day, week in and week out. We've got teams with hundreds of people that are constantly on top of this and managing portfolios in a way that are going to react to this stuff, because every day, every night, these conditions are changing, especially when this volatility index is high. So I would just challenge you, if you're trying to manage all this stuff on your own and you're not fully understanding why things are moving the way they are, give us a call. Come check out ClearPathRetirement.com. This is what we do, and we give clients a peace of mind that, we do a bi-weekly market update where we're, talking about this stuff, but the message is always the same, is that clients don't have to worry about this stuff as much because we're on top of it. And the response I always get from clients is, hey, thanks for the info. It's always good to understand what's going on, but we know you guys got it, right? We don't have to check up on it as much. So if you guys have never, sat down with a firm that can really do that stuff, I'd give us a call.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for that update, Mitch. And that leads right into some things that I want to talk about here. in that, what Mitch was talking about is very important to understand, in that the portfolios that we offer clients at ClearPath are designed portfolios for people in retirement. And, investing in retirement, we've said it many, many times, investing in retirement is a different ball game than investing when you're in your accumulation years and you're growing assets. In your accumulation years, you are, enjoying contributions to those accounts. You're enjoying matches from the employer to those accounts. If you have a long time horizon, you don't really have to watch those accounts very closely. And over good long periods of time, statistically speaking, the market has always done well and given good returns, so that you have that benefit going on. But when you get to retirement, now there's no more contributions, there's no more employer match. The only thing you have is either growth or decline in those accounts, and now you're depending on those accounts for income. And when you take a hit in those accounts and you are also having to pull income off of it with the account down, that is a pretty awful feeling, and our clients have expressed to us many times that is where they felt like, they were making bad decisions. They were, really, watching the markets, anxious, nervous, feeling, upset. And so, there's a way to manage funds in retirement and a way to manage your assets in a way that you don't need to feel that way. And that, really starts with the whole philosophy that most people approach retirement and they don't make any allocation changes from what they had all those years they were accumulating. And they kind of approach retirement with this one big portfolio. And maybe you've got, a good allocation as far as maybe it's a 60-40,
Right.
60 being equities, 40s being more, a safer bond type fixed income portfolio. It's still all one portfolio, and you're drawing off of that for income. And again, if you start to see major corrections in the markets, and that portfolio is losing value rapidly while you're taking those withdrawals, then you start to maybe make poor decisions when you start to reallocate that portfolio. And in order to avoid that, I would just say we'll share our general philosophy on this, but don't go into retirement that way. Go into retirement with at least 3 different portfolios, and have those 3 different portfolios address different time frames of retirement of when you're actually going to need and use that money. And it's really critical that first 5 years of retirement, the portfolio that you're going to use to fund the first 5 years should be very conservatively allocated. It should be in very conservative investments that aren't going to move a lot with the markets at all, and are going to give you a sense of stability of income in those first 5 years. Because what that's going to do is it's going to change your mindset, and psychologically it's going to play a major role in how you feel about your retirement. And if you have money that's not moving around a lot in those first 5 years, you don't feel necessarily the need to make big changes should the market start to correct, in that the other money that you have can be, more moderately or aggressively allocated. And if you don't need it for 5 years, you don't need to make huge adjustments. And man, I'll tell you, that just changes your whole thought process and psychologically makes you much calmer and less anxious when those things are going on and there is a lot of volatility. To avoid that kind of feeling that you get, think about allocating across 3 different portfolios The first being the one we just mentioned, for the money you're going to need for the first 5 years of retirement, make that super conservative. It still needs to earn, the best return it possibly can without taking a lot of risk.
Yep.
That can be CDs, it can be money markets, it can be treasuries, it can be bonds, it can be, a lot of things, but make it a stable source of income for the first 5 years. And then you're able to free your mind and to not feel the anxiety and really be pacing a hole in front of the TV, watching the markets as things get volatile as they are right now. And, take that psychological part of it off the table for yourself. You'll do yourself a big favor.
You will. And you'll prevent yourself from, the most fundamental mistake is, without that allocation structure, what will happen is your accounts will be down. You'll need the income in retirement, of course, and you'll start selling out of the positions that you're relying on doing well. When we've got the first 5 years covered, we know where that money is going to come from. We can leave ourselves that longer time horizon stuff like aggressive stocks and that sort of thing to grow. But if you're in retirement and you don't have that plan and the account starts losing money and your stocks that you expect to do well over a long time horizon are down, you start selling out of those, then you're taking yourself out of the position to get the high returns, which we need on some of the portfolio. Not everything, but some of it. And this, understanding the mix of these things, these time horizons, is the backbone of retirement income planning.
Yeah. We're going to talk a lot more about this, guys. We will be right back. If you want more information, go to clearpathretirement.com, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. Hey, welcome back in ClearPath Retirement Radio. I am Stewart Smith. I'm here with Mitch Davies, and today we are talking about how investments need to be different in retirement than when you are growing your assets in what we call the accumulation years, and how your mindset and your focus needs to change from that pure growth mindset to more of a preservation and tax efficiency mindset as you go into that retirement phase of life. And, investing in retirement is a very, very different animal. And so we've talked about the strategy that we use, which is not to go into retirement with one big portfolio, but to address different time segments and time horizons of retirement with different portfolios of money that are allocated differently and make more sense, statistically speaking, to help you to achieve the type of returns that you need to hedge inflation and not to erode principal, and make sure that your money lasts throughout a 20, 30 plus year retirement, and make sure that you don't have anxiety and stress as you go through this, what should be the golden years of your life, and you should be enjoying yourself and relaxing after all those hard years of work that you put in to get there. The last thing you want to do is be in retirement and be stressing about the markets. So one of the ways we've talked about addressing that, again, is to have the first 5 years of income that you're going to need in a portfolio that is extremely conservative, that's going to earn the best return possible while taking very, very little risk, something that's not going to move and fluctuate a lot in a volatile market. And then the years 5 through 10 of retirement, have that money in a different portfolio that you're not going to need to touch for 5 years. And let's get a little more moderate. Let's take a little risk on that one.
Yep. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to go full aggressive on this. It doesn't have to be, hyper growth stocks, but let's start to get a little bit more aggressive. Let's start to have some exposure to, because we've got that first bucket protected. We know for the next 5 years we're fine, and we have that 10-year golden window where we know historically that we're going to see some type of growth. So this next 5 to 10 years, it's not our most aggressive, but it's that second bucket, that moderate bucket we get to really lean on after.
Yeah, and we typically like, your consumer staples and your defensive stocks and energy stocks and things of that nature for that type of investment. And, it's just going to, again, this just makes sense. It's very strategic. If you have, I've got 5 years of income, it's stable, it's not going to move much, and it gives you the confidence and the stability to know you're getting through that time. And if you're the second portfolio, that's the 5 to 10 year money, if that's fluctuating a little more, it's not making you very nervous. It's not playing those psychological games with you that we see so often people react to and make poor decisions to. And then with money that you're not going to need for 10 years, let's go ahead and do that into a third portfolio. And let's get even a little more aggressive on that.
Yeah.
That's where, if you want exposure to those tech stocks, if you want exposure to the things that are going to correlate with a lot more risk, then that's where you want to do it. Because if we look historically at the markets, we understand that those riskier investments, given a 10-year time horizon, have always produced pretty good results.
Right.
Even though they may fluctuate up and down a lot, that if you do have 10 years to wait on that, then you're typically going to come out better with those riskier type investments with a 10-year time horizon. So it's very, very strategic how you need to understand how to invest once you get to retirement. And, like we said before, if you're deploying, Roth conversion strategies, then a lot of times in that second and third portfolio, you can be converting that stuff over that time horizon as well. And maybe if you're really smart and really strategic, you can have all of the IRA money you're not going to need for income in that first 5 years converted to Roth before you even get to that second bucket, which would even be more advantageous to you in retirement. And, these are the type of strategies. And, again, the portfolios that we offer you at ClearPath Retirement are portfolios that are not designed for folks who are in that accumulation phase and growing assets and making contributions. They are portfolios that are designed for tax efficiency for retirement, people who are in retirement. So, they're going to we have a team that actively manages those portfolios. So in volatile times, even the more aggressive and risk-on type portfolios that we offer are going to, they're going to be smart about how they're allocating those things, and they're going to, maybe not have you in, some of these AI speculative type situations. They're going to be more in the energy and the things that people, in volatile times that tend to shine and do well. Just having an active portfolio where it's being traded according to what the markets are doing can be a huge difference maker, as opposed to those folks that we've seen that come in that are managing their own portfolios, and they're more in these, passive type funds that if the market does start to correct, there's nobody really actively managing that fund through that time. And so they're kind of left at the mercy of whatever, the market's going to do. And then on top of that, they're scared to make changes to it because they're scared they're going to get out at a low and miss the recovery. And so they're playing that timing game, which you never want to play in retirement. And so, having, again, actively managed portfolios that are strategically invested along different time horizons with different risk involved with each portfolio is how you want to do it in retirement.
Absolutely, Stewart. And, the active management there is so key. And even looking at that third bucket, So we've got the first 10 years covered. Looking at that third bucket, it's going to be very different to have an active managed portfolio that's aggressive than just buying a few tech stocks and seeing what happens. Our team, even in our aggressive portfolios, like Stewart mentioned, is going to be constantly rotating, looking for, what's going to react the best to this environment that we're in. But it's so important to have some kind of exposure to that third bucket, because what we've seen historically, again, first of all, is the 10-year time horizon has proved to be successful. What we've also seen, especially in the last 25 years, is a large amount of the growth, if you look at an average return, a large amount of the growth comes from a small amount of the stocks. We've seen a few companies of the overall market carry a lot of the weight. So a huge mistake people will make is without a time horizon investing strategy, they'll just have everything kind of conservative and they don't have any access to the big home run hitters. Now, you don't want to have all your money in the home run hitters, but knowing that the next 10 years of retirement are covered gives you flexibility to reach out into that third bucket, which is so key. If we look at the last 10 years, we've had what we call the Magnificent Seven, which are 7 companies that have drastically outperformed the other 493 in the S&P 500. And if you took out those 7 companies, and these are the biggest companies you guys can think of, NVIDIA, Tesla, Google, Amazon, if you took those companies out of the S&P 500, the return is almost half of what it is with them. And that's 7 companies in a 500 company index. So what that tells us is we need to have exposure to whatever the hottest market is at that time. And that's constantly going to change. And it's not going to always be AI chips. There's going to be something different. But having an active team that can have you in an aggressive bucket to have exposure to these types of things with a small amount of money. It doesn't have to be everything. We've got the 2 buckets that are covering our bases, but having exposure to that in an active professional way is huge to really offset inflation and see the types of returns that allow us to do more.
Absolutely. Yeah, research shows that a 30 to 40% market drop in the years 1 through 3 of a retirement can cut a portfolio's lifespan nearly in half, even if the markets fully recover afterward. So just to kind of recap here, over a 30-year period, the math works like this. Bucket 1 sacrifices some return to buy you stability. Bucket 2 earns moderate returns to keep the system funded. And Bucket 3 earns growth level returns on the largest share of your assets for the longest period of time. The blended result is a portfolio that behaves more consistently and produces a higher average return than a static allocation ever could. If you are interested in seeing what this looks like in your portfolio and having us, really show you and model out and do a portfolio comparison between what you're doing now and how we would do things, and you think there's value in that, then please come see my team, ClearPathRetirement.com. Get started today. Let us know, get on our calendar. Let's just sit down. Let's have a 15-minute conversation about, where we can add value and how we see things coming from a retirement planning perspective and not an accumulation perspective. Because again, we say it all the time, retirement planning is a very, very different skill set than accumulation planning. And that's where we really bring value to the table for our clients. I can't tell you the hundreds of clients I've dealt with over the last 25 years who I know for a fact have lived much fuller, richer retirements because of the planning and work that we've done for them. If you're interested in that type of planning, ClearPathRetirement.com. Let's have a conversation and let's get you headed in the right direction.